years. Just to piggyback on the global considerations, as you say, the U.S. economy has been growing. Are you worried that given the global interconnectedness, the low inflation globally, all of the other concerns that you just spoke about, that you may never escape from this zero lower bound situation?
So I would be very surprised if that's the case. That is not the way I see the outlook or the way the committee sees the outlook. Can I completely rule it out? I can't completely rule it out, but really that's an extreme downside risk that in no way is near the center of my outlook.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. If the economy develops as the summary of economic projections suggests, you will see improvement in labor markets, but it won't push inflation up any faster. So I'm wondering what the argument is for raising rates this year as suggested by the dot plot, because even allowing for long and variable lags, you're not forecasting an inflation problem that would seem to suggest the need for a steeper and faster rate path for at least a couple of years.
So if we maintain a highly accommodative monetary policy for a very long time from here, and the economy performs as we expect, namely it's strong and the risks that are out there don't materialize, my concern will be that we will have much more tightening in labor markets than you see in these projections, and the lags will be probably slow, but eventually we will find ourselves with a substantial overshoot of our inflation objective, and then we'll be forced into a kind of stop-go policy. We will have pushed the economy so far it will have become overheated, and we will then have to tighten policy more abruptly than we like. And instead of having slow, steady growth, improvement in the labor market, and continued improvement and good performance in the labor market, I don't think it's good policy to have to then slam on the brakes and risk a downturn in the economy.
Mike Derby with the Dow Jones Newswires. One of your colleagues in the dot plots said they'd like to see negative interest rates. Didn't expect to see that. What do you make of negative interest rates as a potential source of new stimulus if the Fed were to have to do something more, as opposed to maybe going to QE? Does negative interest rates have any part? Should it be part of the Fed's toolkit, essentially?
So let me be clear that negative interest rates was not something that we considered very seriously at all today. It was not one of our main policy options. But one participant in the committee would like to see additional accommodation, is concerned by the inflation outlook, and thinks that we need additional stimulus, additional accommodation to provide that, and propose doing so by moving interest rates negative. That's something we've seen in several European countries. It's not something we talked about today. Look, I don't expect that we're going to be in a path of providing additional accommodation, but if the outlook were to change in a way that most of my colleagues and I do not expect, and we found ourselves with a weak economy that needed additional stimulus, we would look at all of our available tools, and that would be something that we would evaluate in that kind of context.
Marty, and then Michelle.
Marty Krutzinger, Associated Press. In July, when you were talking to us, you said that you and also when you talked about the developments in financial markets and what caused the August turbulence, you mentioned China and other things. You didn't mention the prospects of a Fed rate increase. Do you think that played a role as well?
So you asked me about my own expectation, and I'd say I don't want to, I speak on behalf of the committee and try to expel implications for what our decision will be. I think it's, that's an unfortunate state of affairs. But I understand, I think it's natural when you're at a point when conditions may be falling in place for there to be a shift in policy. It's natural that that should happen, and it does to some extent contribute to uncertainty in financial markets.
Michelle, and then Greg.
Hi, Michelle Fleury, BBC News. You talked a lot about the strong dollar. I wondered, do you see your policy actions affecting the dollar? Is it something you consider when you're making your policy decisions?
So, monetary policy, U.S. monetary policy, is directed toward trying to achieve the goals that Congress has laid out for us. When monetary policy tightens and interest rates rise, it commonly is the case, either when it happens or in expectation, the expectation that that's coming. Interest rate differentials globally do tend to induce capital flows that have impacts on exchange rates. So monetary policy often has some effect on the exchange rate, and it's not, in my view, the main channel by which monetary policy works. It's one of a number of different channels by which monetary policy works, but it does have some impact on exchange rates, and of course, yes, we need to take that into account.
Greg, and then Nancy.
Greg Rapp from MarketWatch. I want to see if you would shift gears a little bit and talk about the housing market. You say in the statement the housing market is improved. How much are you counting on the housing market for growth going forward, especially since the committee sees rates rising? Thanks.
So we are envisioning further improvements in the housing market. It remains very depressed. Housing starts below levels that seem consistent with underlying demographics, especially in an economy that's creating jobs, and we have lots of people who are still doubled up, and demand for housing should be there and should materialize as the job market improves and income growth improves. So are we counting on it? Housing is now a very small sector of the economy. It is not the it is not the key driver in my own forecast of ongoing improvements in the U.S. economy. It plays a supporting role, but consumer spending is the main driver, bolstered by, decent outlook for investment spending. But I would continue to expect housing to improve. And remember, we're envisioning, if things go as we anticipate, a pretty gradual path of increases in short-term interest rates over time. To some extent, that's already embodied in longer-term rates. On the other hand, as time passes and we move beyond the window in which short rates are zero, it will be natural for long rates to rise some. And, of course, we recognize that the housing market is sensitive to mortgage rates. It is an important factor. But that's something that, of course, we're taking into account in thinking about what's the appropriate path of policy.
Nancy, John?
Nancy Marshall-Genzer with Marketplace. You mentioned you've gotten a lot of unsolicited advice, the folks outside, but there's another side that says the Fed should raise interest rates because keeping rates so low for so long has actually exacerbated the wealth gap. Do you think the Fed has widened the wealth gap with its low interest rate policy? These people say low interest rates mainly benefit the wealthy.
Well, I guess I really don't see it that way. It is true that interest rates affect asset prices, but they have complex effect through balance sheets, through liabilities and assets. To me, the main thing that an accommodative monetary policy does is put people back to work. And since income inequality is surely exacerbated by having high unemployment and a weak job market that has the most profound negative effects on the most vulnerable individuals, to me, putting people back to work and seeing a strengthening of the labor market that has a disproportionately favorable effect on vulnerable portions of our population. That's not something that increases income inequality. There have been a number of studies that have been done recently that have tried to take account of many different ways in which monetary policy, acting through different parts of the transmission mechanism, affect inequality. And there's a lot of guesswork involved, and different analyses can come up with different things. But a pretty recent paper that's quite comprehensive concludes that the Fed policy has not exacerbated income inequality.
We'll go to John and then Steve with the last question.
John Pryor with Politico. John. Thanks. John Pryor with Politico. What role did a possible government shutdown this year play in your decision today to delay the rate hike? And what would you say to lawmakers who are pursuing this strategy yet again?
Well, it played absolutely no role in our decision. I believe it's the responsibility of Congress to pass a budget, to fund the government, to deal with the debt ceiling so that America pays its bills. We have a good recovery in place that's really making progress, and to see Congress take actions that would endanger that progress, I think that would be more than unfortunate. So to me, that's Congress's job. Congress charged us with forming an economic outlook that is focused on the medium term and taking appropriate policy actions based on that outlook. And that's what we have done in the past and will continue to do going forward.
Thanks, Steve.
Madam Chair, Steve Beckner of MNI. You said in your opening statement that the Fed's policy of maintaining a large balance sheet by not starting to shrink that balance sheet by curtailing reinvestments and rollovers, that helps add to your accommodative monetary stance on top of the near zero federal funds rate. By delaying rate hikes, logically, are you not also delaying reducing the balance sheet? A year ago, the FOMC said it would not start shrinking the balance sheet until it started raising the funds rate. So is it a concern that you are delaying normalization of the balance sheet? Was that an issue that you and your colleagues discussed? Thank you.
We have been, and this was reported in the minutes of our July meeting, we have been discussing reinvestment policy. Our normalization principles indicated that we would not begin to either reduce or eliminate reinvestments until after we have begun to raise the federal funds rate. Our principles said that the exact timing of that would depend on economic and financial conditions and our evaluation of them. And that guidance continues to be accurate. We don't have anything further on it, but it is certainly true that we have committed to wait to begin running down our balance sheet until after we've begun the process of normalization. So yes, if we defer, this is not a very